With me now in studio is Namatai Kwekweza, the recipient of the 2025 German Africa Prize. She's the Regional Director of We Lead Africa. Congratulations, Namatai. It's good to have you with us. What does this recognition mean to you?
So thank you so much for having me in studio today. The first thing I wanted just to say is that this recognition is a very powerful recognition, not just to me, but to our organization, our team, and the young people in our constituencies that we've worked with for the past 8 years. This is a full circle moment because, when I started this organization, I was 18. And it's quite unusual that you have young women, in their activism, leading institutions that are able to make such a significant impact. So this award goes beyond just me, but I think it is the representation of the collective dreams, imaginations, and hopes of the young people that we are working with. And definitely it means that there is an awakening towards youth leadership, and particularly the leadership of young women, and also willingness to recognize it and support it across the continent.
Right, and help us understand the space in Zimbabwe in which you work, the civic space, the democratic space, for people who are not familiar.
That's fantastic. So in Zimbabwe, in terms of the civic space and the democratic space, we have unfortunately experienced a lot of regressions. And I think it's not something that is peculiar or unique to Zimbabwe only, but it's something that we are seeing across the world. I think that when you look at the civic space, we have seen the introduction of the Private Voluntary Amendment Act, which is basically meant to stifle NGOs. Everybody has to re-register. We have seen the introduction of more draconian pieces of legislation, such as the Cybersecurity and Data Protection Act. We have seen the introduction of the Patriotic Act. And all of these are pieces of legislation that are increasingly making civic space quite repressive. But I think a major characteristic that we have seen is just a repulsion to, certain civic and political rights, the rights together. It's becoming increasingly difficult for people to convene. A crackdown on media freedoms, so the right to freedom of expression and the rights of journalists consistently are being violated. So, for us in Zimbabwe, it is a time that we have to really look deep within ourselves and to ask ourselves, is it really worth it and meaningful, to fight to protect and preserve democratic and civic space? Because we have seen a gradual regression, definitely.
And that includes your experience being pulled off a plane, locked up, put on trial. What did that experience, that ordeal, teach you about activism in Zimbabwe?
Okay, so look, when you are an activist, I think these things do come, and I think they come often at times when you least expect them. I never expected that in my own country I would, have the security system ground a whole plane. The plane was ready to take off. The engine had started, but they turned off the engine, they opened the doors, and they extracted us. I never thought I would be abducted. I never thought I would be held incommunicado and eventually imprisoned. And I think that that particular experience has really taught me that, there is a true cost to struggle. Unfortunately, for us to get whatever, gains of democracy, whatever gains of freedom that we aspire for, we have to pay the price in full. And sometimes it's going to happen in very unexpected ways. The last thing that experience taught me is to trust in my own power, but also to believe in solidarity, because there were a lot of people that came through for myself and the colleagues that I was held with. And I do have a faith in the unbreakable will of people, and particularly people-to-people solidarity. And I do have faith in the unbreakable aspects of the human spirit.
Right. But that's not easy, especially with what you experience, what many young people across Africa are experiencing. We've seen suppression of youth activists across the continent. How would you convince other Africans that this is worth the risk?
So the thing about it is that we are living at a time where we have seen a lot of regressions, particularly in democracy. And I think that when you look at it, even the place in the world that people thought they could run to are either not willing to receive people, or they're also not democratic themselves anymore. So the reality of the matter is, for a lot of people, and unfortunately this is the reality, this is what the statistics are saying, that over 70% of the world's population is now living under an autocracy. That's quite different from about 30, 40 years ago, where it was less than 40%. So the world is becoming an increasingly dark place. And we have to come to terms with the realization that if we want to live in a better world, we want to have a brighter future, we want to have lives that are filled with dignity, lives that are filled with opportunity, where we have access to good healthcare, where we have access to good education, where people are able to, as Barack Obama says, speak their mind freely and not hear a sudden knock at the door, right? We actually have to step our foot down and do something about it, which often means that we have to confront systems of power, systems of oppression, systems of tyranny. And the reality of the matter is that there will always be backlash. You could find yourself abducted or in prison, like what happened to me at some point. But I also then always make people this invitation, right? It's difficult, it's hard to wake up and not be able to afford 3 basic meals a day. It's difficult, and it's definitely hard to be arrested and imprisoned for speaking truth to power. It's also very difficult and hard, for you to, be abducted, or to have them disappeared, or to lose loved ones, or to lose property, etc., in the struggle for democratic freedoms. But what's also hard is to live a life with no opportunity, with no possibility, with no dignity. So I think it's also important that we as Africans, especially as African youth, choose what kind of hard we want to experience: the hardships of trying to change the system to make it better, or the hardships of expecting or accepting to live life as it has been given to us.
Would you say that's what keeps you going?
What keeps me going is solidarity. I think that and that's really my point of emphasis, that I'm believing in the power of us doing things together, and I'm believing in the power of people that have a shared mindset, a shared belief, coming together and working together. And that is what keeps me going. I do also have a radical core and a radical belief in the unwavering faith that every person born, every person alive is deserving of living a life that is full of opportunity and possibility. And I think the only way that that can be achieved is if people live in environments where their rights are respected, where there is rule of law and there is generally democracy. So I think that is principle, that is core. But I think beyond that, when there are hardships and there are difficulties, I have received love and help from strangers. I remember once when I was released from prison, I had a young man from Denmark send me a message on LinkedIn, and he was saying that he wanted to send me money for my legal fees. I don't know him, but he'd say that he had heard my story from a Zimbabwean young woman who actually is learning there. And I told him that I do have legal aid. I had a team of lawyers that were already assisting. But I think it's in those moments when you know that there are people who think about you, who remember you, who have you in their thoughts, in their minds, in their prayers, and who are also willing to show up and step up materially, who are willing to show up and step up by posting, by sharing, by talking to other people. Mm-hmm. That, for me, keeps me going.
Namatai Kwekweza, thank you very much for speaking to us. Thank you for your time, and congratulations once again.
Thank you so much for having me.